What you are about to hear is a story about 4 words. 4 words spoken inside one of the most historic and most guarded estates in England. 4 words that did not come from a palace, did not come from a legal team, did not come from any of the institutional machinery that has been positioned against Harry and Meghan for years. They came from a brother, Diana's brother, the man who has guarded her memory for 30 years, the man who controls the island where she rests. And those 4 words, "Is this a joke?" have just changed everything about the Sussex content strategy, forever. Hello friends. My name is James and you are watching Royal Daily Report, your #1 source for the most exclusive and most shocking royal stories on the internet. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because tonight we are telling the full story of the Althorp veto, who Charles Spencer actually is, what was reportedly proposed, why he reportedly said what he said, and what it means for the Sussex brand going forward. And if you have been with us from the beginning, you already know, we never hold back, we never pull back. Let us get into it. And before we go one single word further, if you are not subscribed to Royal Daily Report, you are missing the most important royal analysis anywhere on the internet right now. Hit that subscribe button, turn on those notifications, because this story has implications that go far beyond one documentary project. Subscribe now, let us get into it. There is an island at the center of a lake at Althorp House in Northamptonshire, surrounded by trees that Diana loved, on an estate that has been in Spencer family hands for 500 years. That is where Diana rests, not in a royal vault, not in a public cemetery, on Spencer land, under Spencer protection, in the keeping of her brother Charles the 9th Earl Spencer. And that detail, which can sound purely biographical, is in fact the central structural fact of everything that follows in this story, because it is not ceremonial, it is structural, and Charles Spencer controls the physical location of his sister's burial. He controls access to her private papers, her home videos, her handwritten correspondence. He controls who is permitted to tell the story of the woman who rests on that island, in what form, on what terms. He has held that role for nearly 30 years. And in early 2026, he reportedly exercised it in a way that has sent ripples through both London and Hollywood that are still being felt right now. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because to understand why 4 words from this man carry the weight they carry, you need to understand who Charles Spencer actually is. And that story changes everything about how you read what happened. Subscribe now, hit that button, turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. Charles Spencer is not a peripheral figure in the Diana story. He is arguably the most important living custodian of it. He was her brother, her blood. One of the few people who knew the private Diana rather than the global icon the rest of the world had access to. When she died in 1997, he stood at the pulpit of Westminster Abbey in front of the royal family, the British government, and a global television audience of hundreds of millions. And he made a promise. He said that Diana's blood family would ensure her sons were raised with the soul and sensitivity she cherished, rather than the cold and hard rigidity of the monarchy. He said it looking directly at the royals seated in front of him at Westminster Abbey, at her funeral. That speech remains one of the most discussed pieces of public address in modern British history. It was not diplomatic. It was not carefully managed by a communications team. It was a direct statement delivered to the most powerful people in the country, in the most visible possible setting, at the most emotionally charged moment of the decade. The fact that Charles Spencer chose those words in that place at that moment tells you everything about how he approaches the protection of his sister's legacy. He is a man who, when he believes something important is at stake, says exactly what he thinks, in exactly the most impactful setting available to him. He has been doing that since 1997, and according to multiple accounts in the reporting that has emerged from royal commentary circles in early 2026, he did it again. He also controls the physical and archival heart of the Diana story. Althorp holds private papers, handwritten diaries, home video footage, personal effects that the public has never seen. He decides who gets access to them and under what conditions. He has turned down requests from documentary makers and major broadcasters for decades, opening the archives selectively and with clear criteria. Every decision he makes about Diana's memory is deliberate. Nothing about Althorp is accidental. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because what was reportedly proposed and why it required Charles Spencer's specific participation to work is the part of this story that explains everything. Subscribe now, hit that button, turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. By early 2026, the Sussex operation was in a position that required a major commercial win. The Spotify partnership had ended in a way that was widely covered and not flattering. The Netflix relationship had reportedly been restructured to a considerably more limited arrangement. The lifestyle brand was generating commentary about overpriced products, rather than the aspirational cultural moment it was designed to produce. The cooking show had reportedly not returned for a third season. The polo documentary had not generated the cultural footprint that was hoped for. Each project had arrived as a potential breakout, and each had settled into something considerably more modest. Against that backdrop, the 30th anniversary of Diana's death in 2027 looked like the obvious answer. A global audience would tune in. The story guaranteed the kind of attention that cooking shows and lifestyle content could never command. Harry, as Diana's son, present for her death, shaped by her absence, would give any project an authenticity no competitor could match. But the reported proposal was not simply a son's tribute to his mother. According to accounts that have circulated in royal commentary and industry reporting, the project was designed to draw a direct and explicit line between Diana's experiences inside the royal family and Meghan's experiences inside the royal family. Diana as the original, Meghan as the continuation. The structure was built around the argument that the same institution, the same hostile press, and the same patterns of being unsupported and undermined had shaped both women's experiences. That framing required Charles Spencer's cooperation, not just his passive consent, his active and visible participation. The golden ticket was Althorp, the house, the archives, the island, and Charles Spencer himself, sitting on camera and endorsing the comparison. His involvement would have told the global audience that Diana's own blood family believed the parallel being drawn was legitimate. Without it, the project was two people making claims about a woman who cannot respond over the quiet but visible absence of the person most qualified to validate or reject those claims. Charles Spencer reportedly looked at the proposal, saw the framing, saw Meghan's name positioned as the modern spiritual heir to his sister's struggle. And his response was 4 words: "Is this a joke?" Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because that response did not come from nowhere. It came from years of watching a specific pattern, and understanding that pattern is the key to understanding everything that follows. Subscribe. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. Royal commentators and Spencer family observers have tracked what they have taken to calling Diana cosplay. Not a term designed to dismiss the tribute impulse, but to describe a pattern that critics argue has gone considerably beyond tribute into something more systematic. It started with the aquamarine ring at the evening reception after the 2018 royal wedding, a ring that had belonged to Diana. In isolation, that was a genuine and understandable choice. Harry, including his mother in his wedding day, was received warmly and broadly, but the pattern continued. The Cartier tank watch, the butterfly earrings, the gold bracelets, items that were not merely pieces of jewelry with a passing resemblance to Diana's taste, but specific and identifiable icons of Diana's personal visual identity, worn at high-profile moments where cameras would be present and the association would be captured and circulated. Critics began noting that the cumulative effect was different from individual tribute. Individual tributes honor a specific moment, a sustained procession of Diana-associated items worn at high-visibility public appearances over a period of several years creates a different kind of visual narrative, one that places the wearer inside Diana's aesthetic consistently, rather than occasionally. The storytelling dimension followed the same trajectory. The 2021 Oprah interview has been compared extensively in structure and in emotional register to Diana's own 1995 Panorama interview. Both involved a woman in a high-profile one-on-one interview format discussing feeling unsupported and silenced inside the royal family, having mental health concerns dismissed by the institution, navigating a hostile British press. The structural parallels were noted immediately. For Charles Spencer, the Panorama interview carries a specific weight that it does not carry for most people. He has spoken publicly about his grief and guilt regarding the circumstances in which that interview came about, circumstances he has described as involving the exploitation of his sister's vulnerability. He has lived with that specific weight for nearly 30 years. For him, watching a structurally similar interview being described in some quarters as Diana's spiritual successor was not reportedly the tribute that framing was intended to convey. By 2025 and into 2026, the parallel was becoming more explicit. Professional photography drew direct visual comparisons to Diana's most recognized portraits. The framing of the Sussex story as a woman fighting a hostile institution was increasingly presented in terms that invited the Diana parallel without requiring it to be stated directly. The audience was being guided toward the comparison rather than having it made explicit. Charles Spencer, watching this accumulation of choices from Althorp over a period of years, would have been forming a view long before the Netflix proposal arrived. The proposal did not create his position. It asked him to officially endorse one, and he responded with 4 words instead. Subscribe to Royal Daily Report right now, because what this rejection means practically, for the Netflix project, for the wider Sussex brand, and for the commercial landscape the Sussexes are now navigating, is the most significant part of this entire story. Subscribe now. Hit that button. Turn on those notifications. Subscribe now. Without Charles Spencer's cooperation, the 2027 project changes fundamentally in character. A documentary about Diana, built on Spencer family archives, endorsed by Diana's own blood family, and featuring the participation of the Earl, who has been her guardian for 3 decades. That is a prestige project. It carries family sanction. It tells the global audience that the people closest to Diana believe the story being told is true and honorable. A documentary about Diana built on publicly available footage and the testimony of Harry and Meghan produced over the active and publicly known opposition of the Spencer family is a different kind of project entirely. It carries the opposite of family sanction. The implicit message that the family does not endorse what is being said, or the framing in which it is being said. In the documentary world, that difference is not marginal. It is the difference between a project that changes the conversation and a project that invites questions about the standing of the people making it. There is also the question of what the archives represent beyond prestige. Charles Spencer controls private materials, handwritten diaries, home video footage, personal correspondence that has never been made public. Those materials were reportedly a central element of what the Netflix proposal was seeking. New and genuinely unseen material from Diana herself would have transformed the project from a well-produced tribute into something the audience would feel genuinely compelled to see. Without those materials, the project works from the same publicly available footage that every other Diana documentary has drawn on for 3 decades, which is a significantly less compelling proposition. By declining, Charles Spencer has also protected something that cannot be recovered once it is lost. Once private materials are digitized and distributed globally, the privacy they represented is gone forever. Diana's handwriting is on public record forever. Her voice in an unguarded home video becomes content. The last genuinely private pieces of who she was as a person, rather than as an icon, are converted into background footage for a streaming platform. Charles Spencer's refusal, preserves those pieces in the only way they can be preserved, by keeping them where they are, unseen, on the island at Althorp. There is also a dimension to this story that multiple royal commentators have raised about the relationship between Charles Spencer and William. William is famously protective of his mother's image and memory. That has been a consistent element of how he has conducted his public life since her death. For William, the question of how Diana's story is told, and by whom, is not an abstract one. William has no formal mechanism to block a Sussex content project about his mother. What he can do is maintain his own relationship with the people who do have that power, the Spencer family. Whether a direct conversation between William and Charles Spencer specifically preceded the reported rejection, no reporting has confirmed that, but the alignment of interests between the two is visible. William wants Diana's memory protected from what he reportedly views as commercial exploitation, and Charles Spencer, by his reported response to the Netflix proposal, appears to hold a similar view. When two people share the same concern and are in regular contact, it does not require explicit coordination to arrive at the same conclusion. For Harry specifically, the geometry of this situation is uncomfortable in a very specific way. The 1997 speech at Westminster Abbey was not made about the institution, it was made about Harry. The promise Charles Spencer made was a promise made to and for Harry. By reportedly blocking a project that Harry was involved in, Charles Spencer is not acting as an adversary. He is acting as someone who believes he is keeping a 30-year-old promise. Whether Harry experiences it that way is another question, but it is very difficult to publicly frame as an attack. There is also a wider industry signal worth noting. In Hollywood and in the global media industry, the perception that a project is operating without family endorsement, and specifically against the publicly known position of the relevant family, carries real commercial consequences. Talent assesses risk before attaching. Brand partners assess alignment before signing. When the brother of the woman at the center of a project has reportedly described that project as a joke, the risk calculation for everyone else connected to the Sussex content operation changes, not just for the Diana documentary, but for the brand overall. The deeper question that the reported Althorp rejection has now placed very visibly at the center of the conversation is whether the Sussex brand has a durable content strategy that stands on its own, without the Diana connection as its foundation. The 5 years since 2020 have demonstrated that lifestyle content and cooking shows and polo documentaries do not generate the audience numbers that justify the scale of deal the original Netflix partnership represented. The Diana anniversary was the card that was supposed to change that equation. Without Charles Spencer's endorsement, that card has been significantly weakened, not eliminated entirely, but fundamentally changed in character in ways that directly affect its commercial value and prestige positioning. The island at Althorp and the silence around it remains in Spencer hands. The promise made at Westminster Abbey in 1997 remains the framework through which Charles Spencer appears to be making his decisions, and the 4 words he reportedly used to describe what was proposed, "Is this a joke?" have now entered the public conversation about the Sussex brand in a way that no amount of press strategy is going to easily remove. The gates of Althorp are reportedly closed, and this time Charles Spencer is the one who has chosen to keep them closed. With the same precision and the same deliberateness that has characterized every decision he has made about his sister's memory since 1997, the project that gets made without the island at Althorp will always be defined, at least partly, by the fact that the island at Althorp chose not to be part of it. That absence will follow it everywhere. It will be in every review, every discussion, every comparison with what the project could have been. The 4 words Charles Spencer reportedly said will be in the footnotes of every piece written about whatever the Sussex operation produces in 2027. That is the specific and lasting weight of a rejection from the person who controls the gates. That is all for tonight, friends. I am James. and this has been Royal Daily Report. If this story hit different for you tonight, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already, and turn on those notifications because we are here every single week with the complete picture that other channels skip past. Share this tonight with someone who follows the Sussex story and who deserves the full analysis. Subscribe now. Tell 5 friends. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay informed, stay curious, and stay royal. Goodbye, friends.